All right, many thanks, Romy Busiku, for that. Keep those going on #morning at NTV. Let's switch gears completely and talk about matters as GBV. Of course, we're looking at sexual and gender-based violence. And the 16 days of activism, beg your pardon, against gender-based violence are still on. And the last day will be on the 10th of December, of course, which will mark the Human Rights Day. And so the conversation is still on #morning at NTV, also generation equality, #let's fight gender-based violence. Of course, on social media, that's the rife conversation throughout these 16 days. But we are, not focusing too much on our children. We've not been able to focus too much on our children in schools. And that's why we need to shift our lens and talk about our children in schools. They are the ones who we think as parents that when we take them to schools ought to be safe havens for them, safe spaces for them. But the reality is, as we look through the papers every single day, newspapers, news here and there, we see that some children are actually being violated, sexually violated in schools. And so what could be wrong and what could be driving this vice whereby our children, who we take to school thinking that they're safe around their teachers, around their peers, are instead being violated? So that will be our conversation this morning, looking at violence against young people in schools and what can be done. Now, to break down that conversation in studios, I'm being joined by Miss Innocent Nabasa. She is the programs officer from the Sexual Reproductive Health Rights Uganda. Of course, it is an alliance of different agencies that came together to make sure that they have one front in fighting violence against young people. Thank you so much for making time, and welcome to Morning at NTV.
Thank you.
I was looking at the statistics, and it's quite unfortunate to see that according to the annual crime report, 2015-2016, crime against, sexual, kind of crimes, sexual violence and all these other vices increased by 4% from 2015-2016. And when I break down the numbers, we're looking at 38,651, that was in 2015, rising to 40,258 cases. And this is in a period whereby now we're making noise about stopping violence, sexual violence in schools and in different spaces against young people, girls and women. So why are we still having the increase? What could be the reason?
Wow, thank you so much. There's so many reasons out there why we're still having this increase, but I'll break down a few. And by the way, also first translate that increment translates to about 1 million women. That's according to Uganda Demographic Health Survey, that between the ages of 15 and 49 that were exposed to sexual and gender-based violence. So young women are also part of this, and 1 million is quite big. So why we're still having this, especially in school, is because some of these perpetrators are not punished. There is a research by public prosecutions and the office of the public prosecutions. They say only 57% of the perpetrators of rape and defilement have been punished. The others have not. And 5% of these the cases have been dismissed due to lack of evidence. So why isn't there evidence? Some of the things that happen, of course, is some people are afraid to talk, to come out and talk when it comes to sex and gender-based violence. We are implementing a program called Get Up, Speak Out, where we encourage young people to get up and speak out for their rights. And now during our platform, some of these young people have been able to speak out. And when they speak out, and they say some of the reasons why they're not speaking out as they're supposed to speak out, there isn't a safe space to speak out. You go to the police, it's an open place, and you're like, how do you say, these are matters of sex. Right. How do you say you have been raped? And also lack of evidence. One of the things, you're not supposed probably to take a shower before they do some tests on you. And how long will it take? Because from the time you've been violated, you have to go to police and report, and then go to hospital to do medical tests, the trauma you're going through. So sometimes someone thinks about all that and like, you know what, I just have to let go. And also secondly, the lack of the comprehensive sexuality education framework is quite a challenge. The good news is that our president promised to have it operationalized. That is during the Nairobi summit. If it is, then that's better. But this framework has been in the shelves from the time it was launched in 2018, it
Right.
was recalled. So the fact that there is no guideline that guides sex education in schools, it's quite a big challenge.
Let me ask you, Innocent. You know, I always try to look through some of these stories that get to the newspapers and get to the media. Just a drop in the ocean. Now you can imagine how many more are not being, you know, brought to the limelight. But the dominating theme around these stories is that these children, after being violated, are threatened. Either threatened that, hey, if you do this, I'll do that to you, or I'll you know, fail you in your examinations, or some of the children who are coming from vulnerable families are threatened in different ways. There's that theme of being threatened. So what can we do in our schools to ensure that, as much as there's that threatening thing, you know, that of course happens, even not in schools, even at homes, that children are aware that this is the structure of reporting, and when I report, this matters will be kept confidential and I'll be protected. Where do we start?
Well, where do we start? One is for these children to get up and speak out. Get up and speak out.
To who?
That's what I'm coming to.
Yes.
As the Alliance, we are using a whole school approach to health. This approach was launched or was put out by the World Health Organization in 1997. Now, this whole school approach is where you empower young people to speak out. Now, the other question you've asked me is to who? To everyone. Whole school approach, when you go to a school to sensitize and empower these young people about their rights, you do not only talk to the pupils or the students, you talk to the cook, you talk to the gateman, you talk to the school matron, you talk to the nurse. So that everyone, because you don't know who this 10-year-old can easily confide in. And like I said, there's lots of trauma, stigma associated with this. You don't want to speak out. It's embarrassing. And you see with our African society, where getting pregnant is such a big crime, I mean, they will think, maybe you were careless, that's why you were raped. How come no one else was raped? But when this young girl is empowered to speak out, she can probably walk to the gate and say, you know what, this has happened to me. What can I do? Who can I talk to? So that is what we encourage. So this is an approach that has really worked. In some of the schools that we've used this, we've recorded a reduction in some of these cases. These young people have been able to speak out. And also the other challenge is there's a lot of money that exchanges hands when such things happen. Many people have opted to have out-of-court settlements. Someone's daughter is raped, and because of poverty, the father is given a cow that's about 1 million, and they say, can we like sow this? And the father will let go. What will he do? This girl is stigmatized, she's traumatized. She'll just sit home, and in the worst case scenario, they may force her to get married to someone that she is not ready for. And you know, all that trauma, at the end of the day, when she gets married at that young age, through that trauma and stigma, chances of also still being violated during her marriage are quite high.
You know, Innocent, and I'm happy that at least we have this, you know, just say it out kind of program whereby children are encouraged to speak out. But for the sake of maybe a teacher who's watching us today, who, you know, is in a school whereby some of these things have not yet been, you know, introduced, so to speak, how can they go about it? You know, how is the program rolled out such that, fine, we have a child who's been violated, they've been encouraged to speak out. Fine. So the information is out. They have told someone or many people. So after that, what's the next course of action? Just for a teacher who's taking notes and wants to borrow a leaf or two and implement the same in their schools.
One of the things you can do as people who have implemented this whole school approach, we know how it works. Maybe they can reach out to the Alliance. But also alternatively, because we may not reach out to everyone, is for these teachers to learn that if you are to empower these young people to stand up and speak out for their rights, to get up and speak out, you have to make sure that you empower everyone around them. Their parents should also know, the DEOs, the school inspectors, everyone should know how it works. It's a matter of knowing that I'm not only going to bring girls in one room for an hour and talk to them. How about the boys? Some boys are the ones violating these young people. For example, if you know the stigma that surrounds menstruation. If you do not empower these boys to know what it means for a girl to menstruate, they'll stigmatize these girls. But if you empower them and they know if a girl has stained her dress, she probably needs to walk to a safe room and have clean. Probably this boy could give this girl a sweater. You see, that is what empowerment is all about. So, and also secondly, like you said, I may have been violated, and I'll tell about 5 people, and then it will move around and everyone will start talking about me. So one of the things also, if you have empowered everyone, the person you've talked to will not be the one to go and talk about it and say, guess what, Innocent has been raped. And you get it, because I'm already traumatized. If you talk about it and if I hear people backbiting me, it's quite stigmatizing. Right. So you have to make sure everyone is involved, everyone is empowered, and most importantly, there should be safe spaces for these young people. Safe spaces where they know I can walk into this place, I can freely talk about what I want to talk about, I can talk about my sexuality, and no one is going to judge me. Everyone is going to understand what I'm going through. That's one of the things that teachers that could be listening need to prioritize. Have safe space and empower everyone to support these young girls and boys that are experiencing this gender-based violence.
Right. I love what you said. Once everyone is empowered, there won't be room for stigma.
Exactly.
Wow, that's good. Now, the other program that I'm looking at, and this caught my eye, is the ASK program. Assess, Service and Knowledge. What is it about?
The ASK program, that was a program we were implementing before we started implementing the Get Up Speak Up program. So it was more about accessing knowledge and services on a certain topic. But that is done. Now we're ready to Get Up Speak Up. That was more about brief profile of who we are and what we've implemented and all that. Yeah.
Okay, so when you talk about young people, over and above them speaking out, and this I want us to break down just for the sake of a teacher watching us or a parent, someone who can borrow a leaf and implement it in their own spaces. So we have gotten up, we have spoken out, everyone has been sensitized. How about the other stakeholders who ought to now take on this perpetrator? Are you confident that the systems that we have are at 100% in terms of bringing to book the perpetrators and protecting the violated?
Well, saying I am confident that the systems can do that, I cannot completely be confident. That is why we're even working for corruption to end corruption in this country.
Lots of working?
Things. Oh, no, I didn't walk, but I walked with my car because I typically couldn't move, the jam was tough. But that's, yeah, so we really need to, you see, if you keep talking about these issues and hold our leaders accountable, maybe we can find justice. When the SRHR Alliance is in Bujiri and we get to interact with these young people, they tell us the challenges they are facing. And when we are doing this, we don't only sit with these young people. We sit with the district health officers, with the district education officers, with the probation officers themselves. They're the ones who are always telling us about these cases. So every stakeholder that is involved, you involve them. You see, we may think because someone is a district health officer, they know it all. They know what they're supposed to do. But you see, learning never ends. So if you keep talking to them, maybe it will trigger them and they're like, I think I need to do something. Why is it that it is my district that is always registering cases of defilement, cases of gender-based violence? What am I not doing right? And also, like I said, if our president has committed to ensuring that the sexuality education framework is operationalized, our leaders need to make sure that is done. He did it on a national platform. We have to hold him and our leaders accountable. We have to make sure there is a guide that guides these young people when it comes to understanding their rights in regards to health and everything. We have to push for the passing of their adolescent health policy, because it gives young people information about sex education, that things to do with teenage pregnancy. They're still at 25%, quite high. Our target was to have 14% by 2020. We're a few days away, and we're still high. You get it? So this adolescent health policy gives young people information about teenage pregnancy, about safe sex, about contraceptives, and all that. So those are some of the policies and frameworks we need in place, so that we as stakeholders, we as civil society organizations, can come out and say, hey, this is what the policy says, so why are you not implementing it in school? The sexuality education framework says this and this and this? Why is it that your school is not implementing this?
Right.
We hold them accountable. And when you get to hold them accountable, maybe they'll beat their chest and say, okay, I think it's high time for me to stand up and maybe defend this.
Right.
You know, these young people are the future generation.
They are.
If we don't protect them now, then we are doomed.
You know, and young people are very funny. And nowadays, the other conversation that is now coming through, over and above there being, you know, sexual violations against them, there's child sex. Sex among children.
Yeah.
And this comes from a point whereby parents have shunned away from having these conversations with the children, so they don't know. Even young children, as young as 2 years, you know, and in schools, there's lack of that sexuality education program. So it's just a rough place to be in. But I want you to speak to the parent today because, well, we can say that we are pushing for the sexuality education program to be, you know, operationalized, and we don't know how long that is going to take. So in the meantime, parents ought to do something. So speak to that, and whereby now we know that our children are very exposed. A 2-year-old of today cannot be compared to a 2-year-old of 20 years back. The things you find them doing in the space of ignorance, them not doing, you'll be like, okay. So we need to do something. So speak to the parent. Where can we start?
We need to start with the sex education at an early age, but age-appropriate sex education. Cut me right. Age-appropriate sex education. What you tell a young person of 3 years is different from what you tell a 15-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 24-year-old. Now, a 3-year-old, you need to tell them about things like bad touches. No one should touch your private parts. No one should touch your breasts. So that they grow up knowing that. So as they grow, because even them, they will start asking you questions. Respond the right way. If a 3-year-old comes and has a condom, it's like, Mommy, what is this? You don't know where she has picked it from. But then you're like, no, that's a balloon and all that. Probably go and ask a neighbor, and a neighbor could say, no, it is this. So you have to find a way. And that is what the sexuality education framework will, those guidelines, those are the things that we'll be talking about. How can I appropriately talk about this information and make sure it is within someone's age? So those are some of the things that we really need to look out. And also parents, we've become too busy. For crying out loud, I left home at 6 and then I probably go back at night. My child is with the maid, even if I've told her, please don't watch this TV, watch cartoons, and even some of the cartoons you can't trust them. So they've been exposed there. So as a parent, you have to stand out and speak to your child, make sure they have information, please. Let them have information, tell them about as they grow. Because most get to become adolescents at the age of 9. And I think 9 is still young. But they're adolescents. They are battling with feelings. Puberty has checked in. So meaning they are attracted to the opposite sex and they don't know what's happening in their bodies. So instead of giving them the information, you're telling them, no, don't do that. They're going to do what they've seen on TV. So sex education should be prioritized. As much as we want it in schools, schools cannot do as much as they should do. And you need to be a good friend to your child so that they can confide in you. If they have a girlfriend, they should tell you, and you need to tell them, please, I'm staying till the right time.
Be a friend to your child. And you know, I love your theme because your theme is very, you know, pro-information, empowering our young children with information. And it says the power of information and policy environment in ending SGBV among young people in and out of schools. Before we move away from the parents, how can parents, and I just want us to break it down today, how can parents go about identifying if their child has been molested or not? Because like you said, we are busy. We no longer shower our young babies. We leave them with, you know, caregivers. And at times it's the caregivers who violate them at times. And because you're busy, this is a child who continues being violated without your knowledge. So how can a parent go about identifying these things? Do we say that make sure you shower your child at least once a week, or what happens over and above trying to cultivate that friendship with your child?
That's true, because we have to avoid the worst scenario. We have to prevent it before it happens. You're not going to wait for a child to be violated and then you go to report to the police and increase on the number of cases of children that have been violated and all that. One of the things you need to do, of course you have to be a friend to your child, but also we need to break down how we talk to our children. Instead of getting back home and say, how are you? How was your day? How about your sleep? Did you eat? What did you put on today? What did you do today? You see, when you talk to them like that, they'll break it down. So ask question after question, question after question, because they're very innocent, and it's easy for them to tell you anything that they want to tell you. And also, like I say, personally, I have a young girl, but when I get home, sometimes I shout. When I'm trying to change her diaper, and has she been bathed very well and everything? You get it?
Yeah.
And I see how she reacts when I'm touching her, checking her armpits and everything. So you will know that, why is this girl reacting this way? Is something happening? And then she'll tell you, mommy, touch here. You get it? When they start doing those things, you'll be like, ah. So you're like, so who told you to touch here?
Yeah.
Then tell them about the bad touches. So be quite critical. That little time that you get with your child, utilize it. And if there's a weekend that you're home with your child, utilize it. And it's the best way that we're going to protect these children. Some of these children are in boarding schools, so you rarely interact with them.
Right.
Yes, we may think that with the coming of the sexuality education framework, the teachers will be able to give them this information. But you as a parent also try to read and see what is there.
Yeah.
And it can also guide you on how you can bring this sex education to your child back at home and protect them. But most importantly, befriend your child, talk to them, and talk to them in detail. Don't be rude. Have time to play with your children and watch them, observe them, see what they do, watch them when they're playing with their peers. That can help you understand how they're playing. Peep at them. If they get in a room and they lock it, peep and see what's happening. Yeah, because you may just say.
Because there are also issues of siblings playing together inappropriately.
Exactly.
In the pretext of what? Ignorance. We're children, we don't know. And indeed, they don't know some of these things. So as parents, the onus is on us to just educate and guide our children.
Exactly.
You know, the other big conversation is beliefs. Cultural barriers. We're in a very patriarchal society. And the president just the other day, you know, gave a statement, and he said that cultural norms, what we used to believe in and still believe in, are some of the things that accelerate, you know, gender-based violence and violence against women and girls. And he was saying that we need to shun away from some of these things, and also cross-generational, you know, kind of marriages and relationships as well. But, you know, that's a big hope and wish. But the question is, this is how we've been doing things. This is how we are. This is Africa. Yeah. So where do we start to change, and how can we change, so to speak, especially with the old folks? And we always say that fine, it's the old folks who are very, you know, grounded in culture. But even us as young people, somehow without knowing. So where can we start in, you know, just slowly changing our mindsets towards some of these things?
Well, one of the things that I can tell you is that our culture is quite conservative. And what happens is, most of the times we are prepared for marriage, but we are not prepared for how to deal with the time before marriage. That's what happens. So as a girl, they keep telling you, see, when you grow up, you're going to get married. Then when you get married, you need to do this for your husband. You need to prepare for sex like this and all that. That is the information that our culture gives us. Yeah. But also, you forget that as much as you're telling me how to prepare my sex with my husband at a younger age, I may start thinking about it. I may start thinking, okay, so what if I do it now? What happens? So you've only told me for life after, but you've not told me how to protect myself. You've not told me, but in case you feel like this now, please, you've not told your children about safe sex. We need to tell these kids, tell them about abstinence. But for those who cannot abstain, you need to tell them about safe sex. My dear, you don't want to deal with the consequences of unsafe sex. Right. You don't want to deal with sexually transmitted diseases and infections for a 10-year-old or 15-year-old. You don't want to deal with an early teenage pregnancy. You don't want to deal with an unsafe abortion. We are losing millions of women to unsafe abortions in this country. So what I'm saying is, you have to start telling them, we need to move away from, we need to break down our cultures. You get it? Because if the message has been abstinence, but has it worked?
Right.
Are these young girls and boys abstaining?
It's the ideal, but
why are we having
the reality is it's not working.
Exactly, it's
right.
not the reality.
Yeah.
Why are we having teenage pregnancy at 24-25%? It means it's not working. So you have to get up and speak out and know it's not working. How am I going to protect my child? Every parent's wish is to see them abstain till their wedding day. But if they're not abstaining, you need to give them the alternative. Okay. That is the best thing to do. Our culture prepares us for marriage, and that's why a woman gets in that marriage, all she knows is, I have to do this for my husband, do this for my husband. Yeah. But they've not prepared the man for marriage. So those things have also, in a way, accelerated gender-based violence, because you've
Right.
prepared the girl, you've not prepared the boy.
All right.
Now, when they get married, then that is when it's going to be challenging for them.
Woo, heavy conversation on a Friday morning. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
you've really woken up parents. Now we need to make sure that we step up. We just have to step up with parenting, because
Yeah.
no one will do the parenting for us.
No
we
one
need
is
to
going to
step
do
up.
it for you.
Many thanks, Innocent Nabaso, Programs Officer from the Sexual Reproductive Health Rights Uganda. Keep the conversation going. #morning@NTV.